Good morning, everybody. So I want to respond to some comments on these YouTube videos recently. So we there was anonymous JD2MC was making a comment on the video that I had posted about where I gave an opening benediction at an event that was a pro-life event. And it says like this: my question is, and it's really not a question at first, the second paragraph is a question. In a case in which an expecting woman was chayiv misa, right? If she was liable to the death penalty and she was found guilty by a proper court and she was executed, my understanding is that in accordance with halacha, the court would not wait for the birth of the child before carrying out the sentence if the woman was pregnant. It said they're expecting. First of all, it depends on how far along she is in the pregnancy. If she's about to give birth, they do wait. They did wait. Again, we haven't had the death penalty in well over 2,000 years, but the fact was that they did allow in certain cases, but if it was dependent on what point of the pregnancy is, most of the pregnancy, they would not wait. So then, based on this, and if this is the case, then the status of the unborn is far more complex in terms of Jewish law than what the rabbi presented in his talk. Or the rabbi, please clarify. I don't know how much of this is really a question as much as it's a statement. And my quick answer was, and I think maybe it might be here, it was that that's the opinion of the Noda Yehuda, was that in the case where particularly where the pregnancy was a case of where the child was a mamzer, the woman getting pregnant would cause her to become chayiv misa, that she would be the act that caused her to become pregnant was a capital offense itself. It was an act of incest or of adultery. So therefore, theoretically, could one? What was offered was some sort of the question was, I don't know what that was. Could the baby be aborted in that case? Since although we don't have the death penalty today, the child would have died along with the mother. So according to the Noda Yehuda, based on my beloved ancestor, the Chavos Yair, who had long tshuva, which we should probably learn together sometime, on this question in general about the status of abortion in Jewish law, which he doesn't really clarify. He says it's zera levatala, which is a sin, but and in some texts it's considered to be somewhat akin to murder, although not capital murder. But it's often, that tshuva I think has often been misunderstood to kind of be almost a blanket permission for abortion, which it's not. And in a certain way, I almost feel like I'm doing my ancestor, a tremendous favor of rectifying that, which his words have been abused and misused, particularly in Israel. But I'll say I didn't read this so carefully when I responded. But we'll go a little weiter. Thank you. Is the Noda Yehuda the majority view on the subject? That's David Barnes, who's one of our friends. If not, could the rabbi elaborate on what the majority opinion, maybe opinions are the issue? I also want to say how much I love, respect, appreciate the rabbis Willingness to cross religious lines and be united with anyone or a group that shares the rabbi's moral, ethical views on important issues such as this. So I want to go back and first of all discuss what did I say on that day. I was quoting two midrashim. One was that Yehuda, by admitting that what he had done not only saved Tamar's life, but also the lives of those two babies, Peretz and Zarach, and that in that merit of saving those children, then the three Hebrew children will be saved from the fire of Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah. And then also I had mentioned, and I was quoting the Haftarah from that weekend, from that Shabbos, that said that God will be with us through fire and through water, that is related to those two things. The fire is that the Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah being saved from the fire, and the water was crossing the Red Sea. That Chazal mentioned in several places that the Uber Shebre Me'imam, that the babies in the mother's wombs, the fetuses, sang a song to God. Neither of those were halachic statements; those were midrashic statements. Those were agadata. However, now does that have a bearing on halacha? Sometimes, but more or less, it was kind of describing the ideology that we should have. Meaning, I consider myself somewhat of a moderate when it comes to this question of life and the preborn. While there are halachic implications, and there's a big discussion back and forth concerning the issues of when the mother's life is in danger, and other issues in Jewish law, and also the question of uber yerach imohu, uber lav yerach imohu, which is not necessarily directly related to this question, but nonetheless is an issue that occasionally comes up in Jewish law. Is that both in human beings and in animals, is a fetus independent? So we would say lav yerach imohu, not the thigh of his mother, meaning not a limb, not a piece of the body. Is it not part of the body? Is it an independent body that's inside of the body? Or uber yerach imohu, or there's opinions that the embryo, the fetus, is a limb of the mother. Modern day science has proven uber lav yerach imohu, that even from the smallest embryonic state, that as soon as the cells start to split as an embryo, there is a genetic difference that is unique to the embryo. I think if Chazal were aware of that, they would have definitively said uber lav yerach imohu. Now that's my own chiddush, I guess. But I would say, since it was a matter of machlokas, since it was a matter of debate as to whether or not an embryo is part of the mother's body or not, it was a matter of dispute. I think if they had the scientific knowledge that we have today, they would conclude that the fetus is not a limb of the mother, but rather that the fetus is an independent being. Still, nonetheless, so now when it comes to the question of the threat to the mother's life, the Yerushalmi discusses this question. I believe it's the Yerushalmi in Shabbos. And if I remember correctly, I made a video on it some time ago. So basically, the issue is who is threatening whose life. So it's not even an issue of whether Uber Yerach Imohu, Uber Lav Yerach Imohu. When the child is yet to be born, and that's causing a threat to the mother's life, that makes it clear that is who is causing the threat. That the threat that the baby has to the mother is more than the threat that the mother has to the baby. Once the baby is born, as meaning with the head coming out or the majority of the body coming out as a breech pregnancy, then the threat to one life over the other is equal. So it's and that is how the Yerushalmi understands that Mishnah in the Mishnah in Kalim? No, it's a Mishnah in Oholos. I often find it interesting that people who don't keep Shabbos, but they're concerned with this one rather obscure Mishnah in Oholos. And that's their whole religion. So I often say that we hear people with the gun control debate saying, "Oh, we don't want to ban all guns. We just want common sense gun laws." And maybe could we say the same thing here? I don't necessarily want to ban all abortions, but could we have common sense abortion laws? And to me, the biggest issue with the abortion issue is the eugenics issue. The fact of the matter that more than 50% of the abortions are coming from 12% of the population indicates that there is a genocide going on, that this is a plan to destroy the black race, and there's something that's been going on for a long time. If you know the history of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, these were eugenicist organizations, and whether or not that's the intention of the people today, that's the outcome. And they'll say, well, the reason why there's such a higher abortion rate in communities of color is because of the higher poverty rate in those communities. But who's causing that? And again, is that by design? Because if you go to a state like Idaho, people of color, particularly African Americans, make more money than white Americans. So the policies of the same party that's pushing not just the choice agenda, but the pro-abortion agenda, is directly linked to what would maybe make someone kind of be more likely to, quote-unquote, make that choice. So a lot of these things are by design. And that, to me, is the big issue. If it's an actual health care issue, if the mother's life is actually in danger, or other issues, certainly there are many things to discuss. And again, I didn't make any particular statement about at what point is the child a child in that sense. We can all agree that it's at least potential life. It is definitely human. It's definitely a unique life. The question as to whether or not this refers to the child. If one kills this child, is one liable to death penalty or not? We pretty much agree in Jewish law that it's not a capital murder for a Jewish person. For a non-Jewish person, though, it's a question, because it says in the in the book of Genesis that he who hashofech dam adam ba'adam dama yishafech, that someone who sheds the blood of a human inside of a human, his blood shall be shed. That indicates that who is the human inside of the human is the fetus inside the mother. And so the Talmud understands that to mean that under the rubric of the 7 laws of Noah, an abortion is a capital murder, and which is what applies to the non-Jewish people according to Jewish law. Again, for the most part, that's theoretical, but nonetheless, that's how the Jewish law views this, according to one opinion of the Talmud. But certainly, it shows that it is something that is very serious. However, again, biblically, we have the passage in Exodus 21, 22 there about, I know it's in Mishpatim, about accidentally causing a miscarriage, that is not a capital offense, and that's also accidentally. Generally, if one accidentally kills someone, you go to the city of refuge, but accidentally causing a miscarriage, and that's how it's understood, although not everyone understands it like that outside of our circles, that one pays a monetary damage, just like damaging a limb, which is the next one. So. And that's consistent throughout, because under the rubric of the 7 laws of Noah, a court could find someone liable to the death penalty for maiming someone under the rubric of the 7 laws of Noah. Not necessarily that they have to, but the courts have the right to do so according to how most Rishonim understand it. The Rambam seems to understand it more strictly, that they have to. And so therefore this would be consistent between the differences between the Noahide laws and the Mosaic laws. Again, for the most part, all of these things are theoretical, but when it comes to this particular question, it shows that it's a serious question that has to be taken seriously. And so generally the way we look at it is that, again, if it is actually a healthcare issue, there are times that one can be lenient. I'm very lenient personally when it comes to the Plan B, the next day pill that pretty much just causes a woman to have her period most likely before the embryo even starts. I know, again, in some Christian circles that is considered to be an abortion and a sin. I think, that's probably more along the lines of what the Chavos Yair was talking about. And again, that's something that shouldn't be taken lightly, but it's something that, again, I think that should be the more there certainly it's a case where you don't know for sure by that time, meaning you're taking a pill the day after, you don't even know if you're pregnant or not. So I think that's probably, to me, I don't see any issue with that. Again, it's something that still shouldn't be used just willy-nilly, but if something happens, the availability, I think, of that should be more widespread. And again, I know certain people disagree. To me, the bigger issue is, again, once the embryo is more fully formed, that's really the point where I think it should be taken more seriously. I think it was Dick Morris suggested that you could actually induce a pregnancy fairly early, meaning the beginning of the second trimester, and keep the baby alive, medically until it's more fully formed, and make the baby available for adoption. That's something maybe that should be considered at that point for a viable fetus. Again, also with cases where the fetus is not viable, and perhaps also it could help. It could actually be a sense of fertility treatment that subsequently a mother could have a viable baby. Questions like that. Again, I'm more liberal or moderate when that takes place. My biggest concern is the eugenics issue. The fact that there has been a genocide really against the black race in America, done by the same party that was doing it on a much lower scale in the past, claiming that they've flipped. But is that really the case? That's more my concern. The fact that a black American in New York City is more likely to be what I call lynched in the womb than to be born is the main serious concern of mine. The rare cases where it is a medical issue, I'm much more, I would say, liberal or moderate on those cases. So it's not a black and white. It's not either or. I think the way one colleague of mine put it is that no rabbi says all abortion is okay, and no rabbi says all abortion is prohibited. It's a much more nuanced issue. Now, some people say, well, they're worried that if you ban some, everything will be banned. It's not really the case. It's not how it is in almost any other country in the world. Most of the countries in the world do have, even very liberal European countries do have some, what I would say, common sense restrictions on abortion. And this idea of abortion on demand is really the biggest issue that I have. It's not that I want to see all abortion prohibited. Certainly, the case of the life of the mother is not something I want to see prohibited, and that's equally for Jews and non-Jews. It's not just that it's okay for Jews. Most poskim understand it that when it says that hashefech dam adam ba'adam does not apply in the case of the mother's life being in danger. So yes, it is of course a very complicated issue in Jewish law. It's not black and white. But that doesn't take away from the ideology of trying to save babies who there's no reason to be killing them. That's what I'm more concerned with. The fact that there is this unfettered approach, that it's just and that there should be a good reason to terminate a pregnancy. And also I kind of like I think it was the Dublin definition as far as English semantics go, even though there really wouldn't be any difference in the Hebrew, is that there was I think it's called the Dublin definition, that when the mother's life is in danger, that's not an abortion, it's a termination of a pregnancy. The example they would give is like if a mother receives radiation treatment for a machlo, and that causes a miscarriage, nobody would call that an abortion. They would call that a miscarriage, or an unintentional termination of a pregnancy. And so in the same sense, the case that's being described in the Mishnah and all those, maybe in English should not be called an abortion, but rather a termination. And that there should be a difference, although the truth is, in the past, the word abortion even was used for miscarriage. So it's not even necessarily stillborn, whatever it is. But nonetheless, that is something that, I think we should kind of, there is some positive aspect of that to make the difference in the semantics of the English language. But it's it's something that I think has been taken out of hand. That's kind of the way I'm looking at this, is that we have to recognize that it shouldn't be on demand, but it also it should be when it is actually healthcare and not just a matter of convenience or something else. And again, I understand that it's a difficult issue, and things should be taken with some sincerity, but nonetheless, if there is a time where there is no medical issue, and even if one person makes the choice to choose life, even when it is a difficult issue, question, that's kind of the way I'd like to see it. I was very happy with the overturning of Roe versus Wade, because I was looking at it from a constitutional standpoint of returning the power to the states, which I think is very much President Trump's view, was that he was not an extreme pro-lifer. He was more of someone who wanted to follow the Constitution and say this, if in New York and in California and Illinois, this is how they want to do it, that's their choice. And if in Texas and Oklahoma and Idaho they want to do it a different way, that's their choice. And maybe Ohio is somewhere in between, and Florida and all these different states, each can do things their own way, as opposed to the judicial fiat of judicial review imposing laws on states. The sovereignty of states' rights, I think, is something that is important, and the idea of federalism is very important, to me more important than this issue. And so that's why I applauded the overturning of Roe, for more the political reasons. And again, I understand that it's been used on both sides in various ways, but nonetheless, I think that is really more of the issue, as opposed to the actual issue. And again, it's not exciting to hear that. It's not what everyone wants to hear. It's kind of the type of thing that's going to upset everybody. I think they used to say the Klosenberger Rebbe made everybody upset, because he told the religious people to love the non-religious people, and he told the non-religious people to be religious, right? And so he upset everybody. And the same thing, I think, kind of here, is that, although I think the truth of the matter is that this is kind of how most people look at it, is that we have to look at this as an issue that is very nuanced and complex, and not something that should be taken, with strong emotions on one side or the other. So I think we should develop. I was asked to be on a television show to discuss this issue, and I was kind of, I guess, because I was asked to speak on the conservative side, and I was too liberal about it. And the question was, how do I see the pro-life movement going into the future? And I don't want to see a federal ban on abortion. I'd like to see each state work it out on its own, and I'd prefer to change the culture and the grassroots level of saying, let's actually value life to the point that where it is an actual healthcare issue, that's a pro-life stance as well. And that should be the whole issue. So again, I'm not an extremist on one end or the other. I'd like to see, like again, the common sense laws. That's kind of the way I'd like to look at it. All right. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment, and we'll see you later. I didn't really answer the question as far as Jewish law, and part of it is because Jewish law is not really clear on this issue. Other than that, when the mother's life is in danger, then unequivocally there is permission. I wouldn't say that it's a requirement to say the way that a lot of people on the left like to say that this is mandated. It's more along the lines of permission under the guidance of proper medical care, that if it's the case of an unborn baby, that the mother's life comes first, for rather particular reasons. It's not necessarily the issue of whether or not the baby is a life or not, or this or that. Everyone can agree that it's potential life, and that's more of the agadic issue that's brought here, is that you're certainly saving a life when a non-medically required abortion is prevented, and also the case with the woman being chayav misa. That's the case that we discussed there. This was the case where the woman was not chayav misa, right? So it was apparently that was how Yibum and Chalitza worked in the time of the Avos and the Shvatim, even though it changed under the Mosaic law. And so therefore Tamar, her life was spared, and the lives of her children were spared. So those lives were saved, and the lineage of the Mashiach was saved, because from Peretz comes the Mashiach. So it's a very big deal. David HaMelech comes from that union. King David comes from that union. And so therefore it's something that's very, very strong, and that's why, again, the Medrash says that Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah were thereby saved for that reason. So it's not only Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah, the whole world was saved from that. So you have to take things very seriously and weigh all of these issues, and that's really the lesson there. So even if there's a halachic realm of saying, well, it's not murder, this or that, it doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want. I think that's the message that we're bringing out here. Just because something's not murder doesn't mean you're allowed to do it, because even if we say, Uber Yerachimo, who you're not allowed to just cut off your finger just for no reason, but if the finger's gangrene, then you have to cut it off, right? It has to be amputated. And so that's the same thing, meaning in Jewish law you can't mutilate your body for no reason. Obviously there's one, it's not a mutilation, but there's a religious reason to remove one part of the body on a male. But beyond that, everything has to be measured properly. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment. And God willing, we'll see you later. All right. How do I turn this thing off?